the murder of Nat Masselli, son of reputed racketeer Pellegrino William Billy the Butcher Masselli, who was found shot dead in 1982 because he refused to give the Genovese crime family payment for a company they jointly owned. When the case went to court, prosecutors claimed the motive behind the hit was to protect Raymond J. Donovan. Donovan, a former executive for Schiavone Construction Company who was accused of associating with organized crime figures. Donovan was Secretary of Labor in the Reagan administration from 1981 through 1985. Donovan resigned his post after he was indicted in what was, at best, a politically motivated case against him. He remains the only cabinet member of the United States to be indicted while in office. Donovan and 6 other defendants were indicted by a grand jury for larceny and fraud in connection with a project to construct a new line extension for the New York City subway. According to the case against them, the group plotted with a Genovese crime family associate who brought in a minority-owned subcontractor. Schiavone Construction, Donovan's company, was required by its contract to subcontract part of the work to a minority-owned enterprise. The minority-owned firm leased equipment from Schiavone and therefore was not truly independent of Schiavone. On May 25, 1987, Donovan and all the others were acquitted with a number of jurors openly applauding the verdict. Later, a second federal criminal investigation investigated Donovan over allegations that he had ties to organized crime and that he was present when a union leader received an illegal payoff. Billy Masselli would be a witness in the second Donovan investigation. The investigation was a witch hunt and went nowhere. Nat Masselli, the son, allowed the special prosecutor permission to record certain phone conversations between himself and Morris J. Levin was a lawyer for the Schiavone Construction Company, which was partly owned by Donovan. Levin had been in contact with Nat Masselli to discuss his father's forthcoming grand jury testimony and wanted to talk some more about it. Pellegrino William Masselli, known as Billy, was Nat's father and had been involved with subcontracting work for Schiavone before he was sent to Ray Brook Federal Prison in upstate New York for 7 years on hijacking and narcotics charges. Joe Pell was created when Billy Masselli took control of Nargi Contracting Corporation of New Rochelle in 1975. The company owner, Louis Nargi, approached Billy Masselli, who he regarded as his best friend of 40 years, for a $50,000 loan to be used as seed money in a subcontract for Schiavone Construction Corp., which had just signed the New York City subway excavation project. Masselli gave Nargi the money, and 3 years later Nargi was out at his own company and Masselli was the new owner. Nargi Contracting and Trucking Company became the Joe Pell Contracting and Trucking Corp., and Masselli owned 49% of the stock. The remaining stock belonged to State Senator Joseph L. Gallagher of the South Bronx. Because Gallagher was black, the firm qualified as a minority-owned business which Schiavone was required to hire on as a subcontractor. The younger Masselli, who had no criminal record, apparently thought he could take over his father's position in the mob-connected contracting business, Joe Pell Contracting and Trucking Corp., which his father had created and ran. Nat Masselli was an accounting graduate of Pace University who operated heavy excavation equipment. He didn't know anything about the business or exactly how it ran or that the company fronted for Mafia manufacturing of $100 million worth of synthetic cocaine and truck hijacking. He also didn't know that his father had a small slice of the firm's ownership and was a front for the company's true owners, the Mafia. When the mob came around and demanded cash payment for their points in the company, which they wanted Masselli to close, he refused a reduction in his father's 7-year prison sentence. However, by Masselli allowing the feds to tape his phone in conversations between him and lawyer Morris J. Levin of Schiavone Construction Corporation, Donovan's company, he had, in effect, dragged himself into the wider investigation of Secretary of Labor Donovan. Because of that, when the Mafia killed Nat Masselli for not knuckling under, led the media and other political forces to assume young Masselli was killed because of his involvement in the Donovan investigation. He was killed because after a meeting of about 24 members of the Genovese family at a South Bronx social club, that they would try one more time to get Masselli to sell out. So they sent 3 men to meet and talk with him one last time. They met. On the night he was killed, Nat Masselli visited his father, who was in the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan. He was down from Ray Brook Prison as a witness in this second Donovan investigation. Nat left the jail at 6:15 p.m. From there he drove to Van Cortlandt Park East, in the Bronx, and parked his 2-door car. Two men stepped out of a car parked behind him and walked up to Masselli's car. The two men left one man at the wheel of their car. One got in the back of Masselli's car, which police took to mean that Masselli not only knew the man, but he also trusted him enough to sit in the back seat. The second man sat alongside Masselli in front. After a while he shot Masselli in the neck, killing him. The car forward and smashed into a car parked in front of his. The two men got out of the car and got into the car they arrived in. The man in the back seat was drastically overweight and had a difficult time pulling himself out of the back seat. The driver of the getaway car already had the engine started and was being to pull out. The overweight man shouted, "Don't leave without me," and then leaped into the getaway car. At that moment, the neighbor who owned the car that Masselli's car had rammed ran from a house across the street, holding a tire iron, yelling, "You smacked up my car," but the hoods had already pulled out and sped past him. The man swung the tire iron into the back of the car. The killers were probably 68-year-old Genovese soldier Philip Buono, who pulled the trigger, and 67-year-old Salvatore Odierno, a Genovese member known as Sally O. Billy, 67. He would be sentenced to 20 years for the murder. Nat Masselli had known him his entire life. Joseph Joe Hooks Verletza, another Genovese member, was suspected of being the third gunman.